Every empire needs a face, but the smart ones stay shadows. Badiraguato, Sinaloa, 1930s. A place where roads turned to dust and promises turned to graves. The mountains loomed like prison walls. The rivers ran dry by June. And if the land didn't kill you, the hunger did. This was not a place where boys dreamed. It was a place where boys disappeared, and the ones who didn't became something else. From this crucible of sun, silence, and survival, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo was born. A quiet child with sharp eyes, not angry, just observing. Always watching who held the power, and more importantly, who pretended to. They called him Don Neto years before he earned it. Not out of respect, out of instinct. Because there was something in the way he carried himself. Measured. Patient. Like a man always thinking 5 moves ahead. While other boys played with sticks, he listened to drunk men speak of shipments and soldiers. While others begged for pesos, he learned to trade secrets for safety. He didn't chase glory, he didn't want applause. He understood early what most men never do. Fame burns, power waits. And so Don Neto made a choice. He wouldn't be the face of the empire. He'd be its architect, the man who laid the bricks, drew the maps, wrote the codes. He didn't walk into the spotlight, he wired it, and let it explode beneath anyone foolish enough to stand in it. 1970s, while most traffickers in Mexico fought over scraps of jungle and blood-stained airstrips, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo was doing something no one expected. He was thinking beyond Mexico. Most saw drugs. Fonseca saw infrastructure. Most saw fast cash. He saw longevity. He wasn't just moving narcotics. He was laying the foundation of a multinational empire. Opium from the Sierras, marijuana from the valleys, cocaine from Colombia, all flowing through carefully chosen corridors, protected not just by guns, but by contracts, bribes, and silence. Every shipment moved like clockwork, not because of muscle, but because Fonseca treated drug trafficking like a business. He wore suits, not gold chains. He sat in living rooms, not trap houses. He negotiated with politicians like they were vendors, because to him, they were. And while the DEA scrambled through the jungle with helicopters and heat maps, Fonseca was sipping coffee in Guadalajara, signing deals that would outlive governments. He knew violence had a price, but so did loyalty. And he paid both, exactly when and how he needed to. And in 1980, while rival cartels were still fighting over whose name rang louder in the streets, Fonseca made the quietest and most dangerous move of his life. He unified chaos. He brought together the wildest narcos in Mexico. Caro Quintero with his grow fields, Gallardo with his network, himself with the blueprint. 3 minds, 1 machine. And in that moment, the Guadalajara cartel was born. Not a crew, not a gang, a nation of ghosts in suits. And at the center, a man who understood that real power isn't seen, it's felt. It wasn't a gang, it wasn't a street crew. It was something the world hadn't seen before in Mexico, a fully operational drug empire. The Guadalajara cartel wasn't born in blood, it was born in boardrooms. And at the heart of it were 3 names: Rafael Caro Quintero, Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. Each one brought a weapon to the table, but none of them fired bullets. Caro had the land, acres of marijuana fields buried deep in the Mexican desert, shielded by cartel money and guarded by federal silence. He was the farmer turned kingpin. He knew how to grow narcotics like crops and how to make them vanish into the supply chain. Gallardo was the strategist, the man with a Rolodex thicker than a phone book. He had law enforcement in his back pocket and governors on speed dial. He turned favors into systems, bribes into policies. But Fonseca, he was the spine. He understood what neither Caro nor Gallardo fully grasped. Fear isn't sustainable. Control is. He didn't just fund the operation. He protected it. He placed men inside customs offices. He bribed generals before they even asked. He created a network of immunity, an invisible fence of paid silence that stretched from Mexico City to Washington, D.C. His genius wasn't in moving product, it was in removing obstacles. Judges dismissed cases without reading them. Colonels rerouted patrols. Politicians smiled in public and nodded in private. Fonseca didn't shout. He whispered, and the world listened. Because he knew one thing above all. Power isn't about holding the gun. It's about owning the man who decides when to pull the trigger. And in 1980s Mexico, Fonseca owned a lot of men. 1985. For years, the Guadalajara cartel had operated in the gray, corrupting systems, buying silence, and moving tons of narcotics across borders with surgical precision. But then, they crossed a line. Enrique "Kiki" Camarena, a DEA agent working deep undercover in Guadalajara, had gotten too close. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was interfering. He'd uncovered the location of Rancho Búfalo, a sprawling marijuana plantation run by Caro Quintero, worth billions. And thanks to his intel, Mexican soldiers destroyed it. To the cartel, that wasn't just a loss. It was humiliation. And Fonseca? He didn't tolerate humiliation. So on February 7th, 1985, Kiki disappeared, abducted in broad daylight, thrown into a car, taken to a safe house tied to Fonseca himself. What followed was not an interrogation. It was a message. For over 30 hours, Kiki was tortured, his skull fractured, his ribs shattered, drugged, beaten, broken, all while cartel doctors kept him alive, so the pain could last longer. Fonseca claimed later it wasn't his idea, that he tried to stop it. But the truth? It happened in his house, under his watch. And in the game he helped build, nothing happened without his blessing. When Kiki's body was found weeks later, buried in a shallow grave, mutilated beyond recognition, the United States reacted like it had been struck with a bomb. For years, the DEA had played defense. Now, they were going to war. They launched Operation Leyenda, the largest DEA investigation in history. Hundreds of agents flooded Mexico. Billions were poured into intelligence. Diplomatic pressure turned to threats. Arrests were no longer requests, they were demands. Fonseca wasn't a mystery anymore. He wasn't a negotiator, a businessman, or a shadow figure. He was the face of a murder, the face of betrayal, the face of impunity. And in the eyes of the US government, he had just signed his own death sentence. April 1985. Puerto Vallarta. Sunlit beaches, tourist boats, and the illusion of peace. That's where they found him. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, Don Neto. Hiding in plain sight. No disguises, no shootouts. Just a man in a villa, sipping coffee. The soldiers moved in, surrounded the compound. And Fonseca? He didn't run. Didn't resist. Didn't flinch. Because men like him don't panic. They calculate. And as they cuffed him and hauled him away, he didn't beg. He didn't plead. He just stared into the distance like someone who had already accepted the next chapter of his legacy. In court, he told a different story. That he never wanted Camarena dead. That he tried to stop the torture. That he'd lost control of the machine he helped create. But no one bought it. Because a man like Fonseca doesn't lose control. He delegates it. Behind the cane, the reading glasses, and the slow shuffle into the courtroom was a mind that had orchestrated the most sophisticated drug empire Mexico had ever seen. The judge gave him 40 years. 4 decades inside a box. Time meant to erase a legacy, but prison didn't erase Don Neto. It preserved him. Behind bars, he wasn't just another inmate. He still had visitors, still gave orders, still got respect. Because in Mexico, power doesn't vanish with a conviction. It echoes. Guards whispered his name like a curse. Other inmates lowered their voices when he passed. And even outside the walls, his name carried weight. He was no longer in control of the streets. But the streets still remembered who drew the first map. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo was technically a prisoner. But no one spoke about him in the past tense. Because Don Neto never truly left the game. He just learned how to play it. From the inside. 2016. After 3 decades behind bars, age caught up to him. And the state caught up to its own limits. Citing poor health, Partial blindness and a long list of degenerative conditions, Don Neto was granted house arrest. No more prison walls, no more guards with rifles. Just a quiet home, a nurse, and the ticking clock of an old man's life. But here's the twist. He never needed bars to be contained, because the world he helped build was still out there, breathing, growing, killing. And in Sinaloa, his name still opened doors, still drew nods in cantinas, still got whispered in courtrooms. Not because he pulled the trigger, not because he bathed the streets in blood, but because he taught others how to organize it, how to institutionalize chaos. Don Neto wasn't just a trafficker. He was a strategist of corruption, a man who turned politics into pawns, police into payroll, and borders into illusions. He didn't scream to be heard. He whispered, and people moved. Even in his final years, weak, gray, soft-spoken, he remained one of the last living architects of the modern drug war. His eyes may have dimmed, but the vision he left behind, clear as ever. The Sinaloa cartel is still operational, still dominant, still built on the foundations Don Neto laid in backroom deals and smoke-filled meetings. His influence isn't measured in territory, but in method. Because when the bullets stop flying and the smoke clears, what survives isn't the man holding the gun, but the man who taught others where to aim it. Some men fight for power, others kill for it, but the ones who last are the ones who learn to disappear. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo didn't want to be king. He built the throne and let the world destroy itself trying to sit on it.